So the aftershocks of Nigeria's 2023 presidential election are continuing to be felt in a politically shaken and divided nation. In the latest tremor, the Nobel laureate, Professor Wole Soyinka, has slammed Peter Obi and the Labour Party leadership, accusing them of spreading misinformation and trying to force a lie on the Nigerian people that Mr. Obi won the election. It's not the first time Professor Soyinka has laid into the Labour Party. A few months ago, he accused their vice presidential candidate, Yusuf Datti Baba Ahmed, of overstepping the mark and making what he called fascist comments in his reaction to the election result, to which the Labour Party responded by saying that, well, fascist is a really strong word that evokes memories of Mussolini's Italy or the right-wing populism of Donald Trump, or perhaps even INEC, which they say is taking away the voice of the people. Certainly not to be used to describe the Labour Party's vice presidential candidate. Well, Professor Soyinka's words have always succeeded in creating a big flutter, and it's no different this time. Take a listen to the Nobel laureate speaking on Wednesday in Stellenbosch, South Africa.
These recent elections, it's unfortunate that because the two things happened, first of all. One party took over the labor movement, which is one of my favorite movements also. And then it became a regional party, more than, whereas it was a marvelous breach into the established two camps. Peter Obi achieved something remarkable there, that he broke that mold. Yes, however, he did not win the election. In addition, my own organization has a monitoring unit. You know the one I'm talking about. And so I could say categorically that Peter Obi's party came third, not even second. And that the leadership knew it. But they wanted to do what we call in Yoruba, gbajue. That is, you know, you have force of arms. You also have force of lies. And it was gearing up towards violence. They were going to send, some of the hardliners were going to send crowds, young people, into the streets to demonstrate. I'm always ready to be among such demonstrators, but only on the banner of truth, not of lies, not of deceit.
Professor Wole Soyinka there speaking on Wednesday in South Africa. So how much are his words likely to drive a coach and horses through the Peter Obi movement? Or is it more likely to evoke just bemusement and moderate levity? Well, for his reaction to this, I'm joined now in the studio by the Director General of the Labour Party's campaign organisation, Osuntokun. Mr. Osuntokun, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, clearly Professor Soyinka isn't taking any prisoners there, is he?
Usually
What's your reaction to what he said?
Yeah, Charles, let's begin on a lighter note. I don't know if you are aware of this fable about a student who went to sit for a religious knowledge examination. And the question was that about Jesus Christ. So he didn't know, he had no answer to the question. He said, look, who am I to speak about Jesus Christ? I would rather choose one of his disciples, to talk about. So maybe to talk about Wole Soyinka evokes a similar sentiment. I've had the occasion to speak with him at length, and the content is as follows. First, there are a number of assumptions that have to be made before we can say that the election was rigged or not rigged. First is the tradition. There is nothing in the tradition of elections in Nigeria that suggests that one party, usually the dominant party, will not rig the election. The same with the INEC. Right. So these are you have to say now, do away with, forget about saying Peter Obi, you first have to establish those facts. But if you take it as an option, you accept it. So where do we begin and where do we end? About when did the elections rigged or manipulated? Second is that there's an assumption, there's a distinction between Peter Obi couldn't have won the election and Peter Obi didn't win the election. There's a difference between that. We're in a scientific age. You know, about 6 or 7 public opinion polls predicated on science came to the conclusion, unbelievable to people, that this is the man who is going to win the election. I remember clearly the one by CNN that gave him 40% to 25% about it. So look, when you look at all this evidence, you stack it against people who are saying that he didn't win the election. Trump must have his own reasons for coming to that conclusion. I know he's angry with us. I will still go and see him to convince him that we won the election when I see him. So these are things, when people say, what we know of INEC, right, is that it is not an agency of truth. Look, INEC went through its director of public affairs, the chairman, several occasions. How can they expect them not to use beavers, their own, innovation? How can anybody believe that will not? So on the day of the election, what happened? We are confronted with a glitch. As we speak, do you know that not all the election results have been posted? Right? And of course, you see, there are a number of things that, are bundled up with this election. Some of them, neither here nor there, the qualification or disqualification of the APC candidate. Now, there are about 10 grounds, right, that the petitioners filed on which the election of President TInubu can be overturned, about 10. The judges found themselves in a situation in which you have to nullify all those grounds. Because if one of it stands, that is the end of the election. It is counterintuitive for 10 grounds of election petition to be dismissed like that. One of them, the judge said, intention. He said it was not the intention of the vice president to be nominated as running mate. So that is the argument against the fact that it was a double nomination. All right? Look, people who are familiar with law, let's even accept that the question of motive comes in. That, okay, he didn't mean to do so. In the cases of murder, right, they can accept it. But what they then do is that they will reduce the penalty from murder in the first to manslaughter. Right? My predecessor was also in a similar situation. The judge said, look, this man is innocent or unaware that things that he was doing was illegal, that he didn't know. So he reduced the sentence of the barrest, and gave him the option of fine, which he did. So from whichever angle you look at this, what we're talking about, and in Nigeria, look, you rig where, according to your capacity, there is no Nigerian political actor, right, who has the capacity to influence or manipulate elections, right, that wouldn't do so. Right, but you see, the problem of Nigeria is a systemic crisis, right? You see, the presidency has become a monster, that has captured and destroyed almost any sense of nobility about succession, political succession in Nigeria. The fight to get to be the president takes no prisoners. Sorry, the president himself, when he was a candidate, gave voice to it, at the thing, what he said at Chatham House. Power is not served a la carte. You have to snatch it, grab it, and run away with it.
Right.
So let me finish.
All that hasn't got anything to do with what actually happens. For example, the judges who ostensibly remove sentiment
I'm not
from,
sentiment.
I know, but remove sentiment from, the purely legal. You said that there's no way that 10 counts could be without merit in all circumstances. But let me leave that for example.
No, and I mentioned one. That they themselves, it's good to establish the fact. The judge said the only exculpation was that he said he doesn't have the intention to do so. If you commit murder today, you can be excluded by that precedent.
You made that point previously. So we all know, let's return to Professor Soyinka. I think it was Chimamanda Adichie who said that he's not usually given to restraint in his use of language, and perhaps that's where words like fascist and lies and deceit come from. But you said that you would go and see him again to convince him. Yeah. He's saying that he has an election monitoring organization, and that incontrovertibly, Peter became third, and that is commendable in the circumstances.
That would be the only monitor, the exception to the rule. That was contrary to what all the observer missions, the conclusion they reached. None of them went near saying that kind of categorical assertion. And I'm sure we didn't read about it. I didn't see it. It was not public. Did you see it?
You mean what was not public?
The evidence that Prof was relying on. Did you see it?
I didn't, but he says.
So that's what I can only comment what we saw.
Yeah.
From the EU, none of those observer missions, came near. Just suggests that somebody came first, somebody came second, somebody came third. No. I'm not saying that what they told Prof is wrong. It's possible that, but I can only deal with what you and I know. All right. I didn't even know that there was such another observer mission. The ones that we know, we've read their reports.
Well, he said he monitored the elections, and people see him as a man of integrity,
yes,
and therefore they don't doubt what he's saying. But do you think that many people still feel deeply cheated by INEC, or have people simply moved on, given the reality of a new president who's simply getting on with the job?
Well, look, the only recourse we have by law is a court. The court will give you judgment, not necessarily justice. There's a difference between justice and judgment. So whatever the judgment is, we have no choice other than to abide by it. I don't believe we got justice from the tribunal. I don't know, more in hope than expectation. I may rely on Supreme Court to do it, but that is more in hope than expectation.
Would it make a difference to you, the Labour Party, the P2B movement, if the TInubu government came out and addressed the very palpable and tangible discontent that you believe is still being felt across the country? Would that provide an opportunity for some form of heroism on his part? Would that satisfy you that he's making effort to try and reconcile the country and move the country forward?
You see, that would be a misunderstanding of the Nigerian problem. I'm not particular about him. The problem that we have, of which the election crisis is a manifestation, is not restricted, it's just a symbol of that problem. If you say Nigeria is a failed state, these are the implications. My own approach to the Nigerian Malay is that it's a systemic crisis in which all organs of government are all implicated. You will find that kind of in the behavior of the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. If Transparency International says Nigeria tops the chart of corruption worldwide, What is the meaning of that? What is the implication of that? The implication is that just about everybody, certainly the judiciary, is implicated in corruption. Now, that is that. Now, the husband of the president of the Court of Appeal, right? The last president of the Court of Appeal, her husband,
Senator Bolkachi.
you remember what he said? More or less said openly that he got his wife to manipulate elections in favor of his colleagues. Now, so if it's the president of the Court of Appeal was that implicated, what will you think of that judiciary? I've said this before. You see this unmerited righteous indignation. What we all knew at the level of theory, we are being told this is the reality. Even the president himself, he alluded to it. He said you don't expect your justices to live in squalor and not be corrupt. With an explanation. That is what he said. So, in judiciary, this is not the only thing. Look, it's impossible. It's almost impossible to isolate any organ of government, judiciary, for remedial action. No. You cannot have a crooked executive parliament and have a saint and have a judiciary of whatever you want to call it. Mm. So this is what, and as I look, we started with the presidency. Right? The reason now, if you want to start somewhere to address the problem of Nigeria, you begin in that place. That place in the Constitution, they are really, deep thinking and recommended for federalism, right? In which power is massively decentralized to the units, the regions at that time. So that you don't have this kind of lopsided, because in the first place, the adoption of federalism is, quote unquote, referred to as tragedy or suboptimal. Right? It is in the recognition of all the difficulties that you have that you do so. Right? Ordinarily, you won't have it, but it's in recognition of those constraints, those difficulties that you have, that you then adopt it. Right. And when you adopt it, it is in anticipation of this kind of problem, that if you over-centralize power at the center, it will be used as Buhari has used it to, right? And probably the next president. The chances that you will get a president who is truly a messiah, all the way, is you don't build science. Science does not. You don't predicate it on anticipation and hope. Right? Science is that you add 2 + 2 and get 4. The constitution that we have today, what it has given us is expecting us to have, is telling us, is adding 2 + 2 and expect 5 to be the
right. So in that regard, you include Peter Obi, potential president, in that group of people.
All Nigerians, see what we have today, right? I don't want to use the word restructuring because it's jaded, but that is actually what you need to look at. Look, when whoever becomes the president, look, let's even assume that you have somebody who is a man of integrity, ready to do the crooked parliament, and others will not allow the president to do so.
So basically you're saying that there's nothing to hope for, really.
No,
even if Peter Obi was the president, there wouldn't be anything to
if we remain
forward.
The way as we are, right? Even if he becomes president, right?
Yeah, but you need the whole idea was for someone who would bring in change.
Look, it can't.
And the promise of him was change.
Yes.
Right.
And I've just told you now how the kind of obstacles that will be erected in his path. Look, the National Assembly will have to approve or whatever, your appropriation or whatever it is. So they go and insert 70 billion naira, in a situation in which you are giving the whole country 550 billion. And the president finds himself under duress to sign it. You heard what the president of the Senate was saying, that he has given a token of 2 million naira each to the pigeonhole of all the senators.
Yeah, well, that's a fairly depressing sort of scenario that you painted there. And I'm wondering what, in that context, I'm wondering about things like the obedient movement and whether they're still, in the context of what you're saying, inspired by the rectitude and righteousness of their cause.
Yes, of course. I mean, for the sake of Nigeria, we don't have a choice. I don't know if you read this column today by Lady Bimbola Adelakun in Punch.
No,
that was what he said. He said, look, those of you who are irritated with the obedience, you need to know this, that in present-day Nigeria, that is the only group of people who can constitute an effective opposition, to the excesses of the administration that we have. Look, they call it state capture. State capture is when the few people that capture the state, and use it towards their end. And then, of course, opposition are decimated, through one way or the other, through corruption, through coercion, through, So like that is why you have Nigeria today. Of course, judiciary being also one of them.
Right. Well, let's turn slightly away from Nigerian domestic politics. And let me get your assessment of the resurgence of military coups in Africa. What do you think is behind those recent coups? I mean, there have been 8 coups or attempted coups since 2020 alone.
Well, I think President Obasanjo was the one who recently mentioned that, look, liberal democracy, textbook liberal has failed in Africa. Right. We don't have that is taking it from there. Right. The success of liberal democracy, right, as such, depends on a number of variables that we don't have. We must have a per capita income, right, of, I don't know if it's $2,000 or whatever it is, that can ensure that you don't need to be desperate for where the next meal is coming from, right? So that person, voters, they have that cushion, to exercise, their civic duty. But if you have, as we are told, 133 million Nigerians in poverty, squalor, right? Who doesn't know where the next meal is coming from? They are susceptible, to being bribed, which is what we call a weaponization of poverty. Right. So in Africa, this is the general rule. I mean, it's more so in Africa. But there's also the fact of the phenomenon of, these life presidencies and things like that, It's a trend that was bound to to be confronted at one way or the other. And it is self-evident, self-explanatory. You look at what happened in Gabon. You look at that man in Cameroon, Pierre. A man who doesn't know where he is cognitively gone. Is he the president of Cameroon? So you see, we are going to have all this stuff, But of course, it has been mostly with the French, with France. And actually, I think it acts back, to their policy, their colonial policy, which is assimilation. This that is saying, all the people they are colonies, they want to change them to black French men, right? That is the only way they can become civilized. So they have this, iron fist, rule of colonization that subsists, right? The annual budget is determined in Paris, almost whatever they have. So poverty, and all this, but basically poverty, right, it is what is driving this.
So the military are taking advantage of that, is that what you're saying? Because, I mean, some experts argue that it has to do more with the spread of jihadism in the Sahel region, because where these coups have taken place, such as Mali, the military cited discontent with the way the politicians were handling the security crisis. But of course, there's, as you said, other coup leaders who've spoken of popular discontent with elected leaders and the populace's unhappiness with their politicians.
Well, you know, I mean, look, they are being opportunistic. I mean, those people taking over government, I mean, the military chaps. I wouldn't, there was an opportunity to be exploited, and they did. They don't look to me like, and of course, with the new developments in the international community, Russia also coming in, you know, to supplant, I mean, to take advantage of the vacuum that is being created by. So these are the factors more than I don't. The last intervention, the military intervention that I will attribute to nobility or idealism was Thomas Sankara. You know, I think he lived. He was there for less than 2 years before he was killed. Right? That is, you know, Arab Spring, yeah, holds an example in the respect that, especially in countries like Nigeria, where the demographic of the population, you know, the younger people, the younger generation constitutes about 70% thereabouts of Nigeria's population, and I think those other countries, they call it the youth bulge, right? So this is also a factor you have to, you know, these are people, and of course, thanks to social media, ideas spread at the speed of light, right? Are able to think, they form what used to be called the critical mass, right? You know, and force these changes in their society. Nigeria was going in that direction with the EndSARS protest, which eventually morphed into the obedience movement. Right? So this is the situation. That is, well, look, there are opportunities for people to...
Okay, very briefly, because we're almost out of time. How do you see the role of ECOWAS in all of that? Because, I mean, the bloc regularly condemns coups and imposes sanctions, but they don't appear to be deterrent enough, do they? I mean, because the coups just keep happening. They've also been criticized by, you know, what appears to be their sort of muted response to the excesses of the elected leaders, and for instance, the illegal extension of presidential terms that you were talking about.
Exactly. You know, look at Alassane Ouattara, you know, from Cote d'Ivoire. He's presently, you know, wanting to change the constitution to permit him to run for third term. He has been one of the most vocal, you know, about this military, ECOWAS military intervention. And of course, well, you've seen all the kind of difficulties that are true. You cannot dictate to people how they should govern themselves, right? I will have, the first reaction of ECOWAS should not be to say that, look, if you don't do this, we are going to invade. No, not at all. I don't think that's proper thing to say. You must maybe have allowed for a few days, 1 week, to behind the scenes, you know, consultations, right? And, you know, be pragmatic and extend the perimeter, you know, of the policy of intervention to include those who are perpetually, who have become life residents, like Benin, for instance. That young guy, look, his father was there, and then he succeeded in, you know, what legitimacy does that kind of person have to prescribe to Niger what it should do and what it should not do?
Okay. Well, on that note, I want to thank you very much indeed. I must let you go away and formulate your official response to Professor Wole Soyinka there. Akin Osuntokun is the Director General of the Labour Party's campaign organization. Thank you very much indeed.